I'm Heather Mitchell, 32, a marketing executive in Chicago with a complicated relationship with my younger sister Amber. When her unexpected call came, I nearly dropped my phone. "I quit my job today," she announced cheerfully. "Ryan and I decided it's best for the family. We're thinking, well, stay with you until we figure things out." The assumption that I would financially support her family of 4 hit me like a freight train. As panic rose in my chest, one crystal clear thought emerged. It was time to move far, far away. Before I dive into this wild family drama, let me know where you're watching from. Hit that like button and subscribe to join our storytelling family. Trust me, you'll want to stick around to see how I escaped the most suffocating situation of my life. Growing up, I always knew my place in the family hierarchy. As the responsible older sister, I was expected to set an example, to be mature, to help out. Meanwhile, Amber was the baby of the family, adored and coddled by our parents who seemed to have an endless well of patience for her antics. Where I received stern lectures for B+ grades, Amber got ice cream and consolation for C-minuses. That's just how it was in the Mitchell household. By 16, I was working weekends at the local grocery store, saving every penny for college. My parents had made it clear that while they would contribute what they could, I would need to handle the bulk of my education costs. Meanwhile, Amber breezed through high school with mediocre grades and a social calendar that would exhaust a celebrity. When college time came around, somehow the financial rules had changed. Our parents took out additional loans for her, bought her a used car, and sent her monthly spending money. I worked 3 jobs while maintaining a full scholarship and graduated with minimal debt through sheer determination. Amber dropped out after 3 semesters, claiming college wasn't for her. My career journey wasn't glamorous. I started as an unpaid marketing intern, worked my way to assistant, then coordinator, then manager, sacrificing weekends, relationships, and sleep along the way. When I landed my current position as executive marketing director at one of Chicago's top firms, no one in my family seemed to understand what an achievement it was. They were too busy consoling Amber through her latest crisis. Amber's pattern of irresponsibility began early and only solidified with age. After dropping out of college, she bounced between retail jobs, always quitting because her boss had it out for her or her coworkers were toxic. When she met Ryan at 23, it seemed like she might finally stabilize. They married within 6 months, a lavish wedding largely paid for by our parents, and everyone hoped Ryan's steady job as an IT specialist would ground her. But the foundation was shaky at best. Within 2 years they had their first child, then another 18 months later. Amber decided working wasn't worth the childcare costs, which might have made sense if they had adjusted their lifestyle accordingly. Instead, they maintained their pre-children spending habits with half the income, and the financial strain was inevitable. The calls to our parents started first just small loans to cover unexpected bills or car repairs. When our parents retired to Florida 5 years ago with a fixed income, the financial requests shifted to me. At first, it was easy to justify helping. They were struggling with young children, and I had no dependents. $200 here, $500 there, always with promises of repayment that never materialized. "It's just until tax refund time," Amber would say. "Well, pay you back double when Ryan gets his bonus." Shed promise. I began to dread seeing her name on my caller ID. My resentment grew with each interaction, even as I continued to love her. She was my sister, after all, and those nieces and nephews were innocent in all this. But the dynamic was wearing me thin, especially as I watched them take vacations they couldn't afford and buy new electronics while still owing me thousands. Last month's promotion should have been purely joyful. The salary bump finally put me in a position to achieve my long-held dream, buying my own place in Seattle, a city I'd fallen in love with during business trips. The Pacific Northwest called to me with its mountains, water, and distance from Chicago's freezing winters and complicated family dynamics. I had started working with a real estate agent, viewing properties virtually during lunch breaks, and planning my graceful exit from the family drama. Then came the phone call that changed everything. I was reviewing quarterly projections when my phone lit up with Amber's face. I almost sent it to voicemail but answered out of ingrained responsibility. "Hey sis." Her voice was buoyant, almost giddy. "Guess what? I quit my job today." My stomach dropped. "You what? Why? What happened?" Amber had finally held a receptionist position for nearly a year, her longest employment stint since having children. The office manager was such a nightmare, always criticizing my work, making comments about my lunch breaks. Nobody needs that toxicity, right? So I walked out. I pinched the bridge of my nose. "Did you have another job lined up?" Her laugh tinkled through the speaker. "No, but it's perfect timing actually. Ryan's been really stressed at his job too. We've been talking, and we decided it's best for our family if we take some time to reset. The kids need more attention, and his commute is killing him." Something in her tone sent warning signals blaring. "What are you saying, exactly?" "Well," her voice took on that familiar wheedling quality. "We're thinking, well, stay with you for a while. Your place is so big for just one person, and you're always saying you don't see the kids enough. It's perfect. We can save on rent until we figure out our next steps." The assumption that I would open my home and wallet to support her entire family hit me like a physical blow. I stood from my desk, pacing as panic rose in my chest. "Amber, that's not going to work. I have a demanding job. My apartment isn't set up for children. And frankly, oh." "Don't worry about any of that," she interrupted. "We don't need much space. The kids can sleep on air mattresses, and you're hardly ever home anyway with your work schedule. You'll barely notice us." As she continued chattering about how perfectly this would all work out, one crystal clear thought formed in my mind. It was time to accelerate my plans to move far, far away from Chicago, from the burden of being everyone's safety net, from this cycle of enabling that had defined our relationship for too long. 3 days after that phone call, I returned home from a grueling day of client meetings to find my apartment parking lot occupied by a familiar minivan loaded with suitcases. My heart sank to my stomach as I realized Amber hadn't waited for my agreement. She had simply made the decision for both of us. By the time I made it upstairs, my meticulously organized apartment was already in chaos. Toys scattered across my pristine living room floor. Suitcases blocked the hallway, and the smell of burned microwave popcorn hung in the air. My sister sat cross-legged on my white couch, shoes on, scrolling through her phone while her children, ages 6 and 4, used my decorative pillows to build a fort. "There you are," Amber exclaimed as if I was late to a planned gathering. "We've been waiting for hours." Ryan emerged from my kitchen, beer in hand, my craft beer, from my refrigerator. "Hey Heather, thanks for letting us crash. Really appreciate it." The casual entitlement in his tone made my blood boil. Before I could respond, my nephew Jack came barreling toward me, hands sticky with what appeared to be chocolate. "Aunt Heather! Where's your PlayStation?" I stepped back to avoid the sticky embrace. "I don't have one, Jack." "Where are your parents sleeping?" I asked, turning to Amber, trying to keep my voice level. Amber waved dismissively. "We figured we'd take your office since it has that daybed. The kids can camp out in the living room. It'll be fun, like a sleepover every night." My office. My sacred workspace, where I often brought projects home. The room with my expensive equipment and organized files. "That won't work," I said firmly. "I need my office. I have deadlines and virtual meetings. You can't just show up and rearrange my life." Ryan scoffed from the kitchen doorway. "Come on, Heather. It's not like you need 2 bedrooms when you live alone. We're family." That word family wielded like a weapon against my boundaries. I took a deep breath and tried reason. "Look, I understand you're in a difficult situation, but you should have waited until we had an actual agreement. I work from home frequently. I have client calls. I can't have background noise from children." Amber's face crumpled into the familiar expression that had worked on our parents countless times. "Where else are we supposed to go? Mom and Dad's condo association has age restrictions. We sold our furniture to cover last month's rent. The kids' schools are nearby." I thought you'd be happy to help your only sister. The emotional manipulation was textbook Amber. I steeled myself against it. You need to find another job, Amber. Both of you do. This isn't sustainable. In this economy. Ryan interjected with a laugh. Jobs don't grow on trees, Heather. And childcare costs would eat up most of what Amber could make anyway. Then why did she quit the job she already had? I snapped. Amber's eyes welled with tears. You have no idea what it was like there. The constant criticism, the unreasonable demands. I was having anxiety attacks in the bathroom. We're family. Ryan repeated, his tone carrying a passive-aggressive edge. When my brother needed help last year, we took him in without question. Didn't realize you were so selfish with all your success. The jab stung despite my knowing better. I looked around my once peaceful apartment, now overtaken by their presence, and felt a wave of exhaustion. Fighting this tonight would only lead to a dramatic scene in front of the children. Fine, I conceded reluctantly. You can stay temporarily, but we need to establish some ground rules, and this is a short-term solution while you actively job hunt. I mean it, Amber. 2 months max. The relief that washed over my sister's face was quickly replaced by calculation. Of course. Well, be model house guests. You'll hardly know we're here. That night, lying awake at 1 a.m., listening to Ryan snoring through the wall and the sound of my office printer running, why were they using my printer at this hour? I knew I'd made a terrible mistake. The next day, my phone lit up with messages from extended family members. So generous of you to take in Amber and the kids. What a blessing you are. Heard you invited the whole crew to stay. That's what family is all about. Your parents must be so proud of how you girls support each other. Confused, I called my cousin Brenda, who had texted. I didn't invite them. I clarified. They showed up unannounced. Brenda's surprise was evident. That's not what Amber posted on Facebook. She said you insisted they stay with you during their career transition because family should stick together. The betrayal burned hot in my chest. Amber had completely rewritten the narrative, making herself the grateful recipient of my supposedly enthusiastic generosity rather than an uninvited intruder. That afternoon, my boss called me into her office. Heather, I was surprised to hear you'll be working remotely 3 days a week to help with your sister's childcare situation. My blood ran cold. Excuse me, your sister called HR this morning. Said you'd agreed to a flexible arrangement to watch her children while she job hunts. I wish you'd discussed this with me first. The second betrayal hit harder than the first. Not only had Amber invaded my home, but she was now interfering with my career, the one thing that was entirely mine, that I'd built through years of dedicated work. Walking back to my desk, I felt the walls closing in. What I didn't know then was that this was only the beginning of a nightmare that would push me to my breaking point before I found the strength to escape. 2 weeks into my unwanted houseguest stay, my once pristine apartment had undergone a disturbing transformation. Sticky fingerprints adorned my refrigerator door. Toys lurked underfoot like landmines. The carefully selected throw pillows that once decorated my couch now permanently resided on the floor as part of an ever-expanding pillow fort that nobody seemed inclined to disassemble. My bathroom counter, previously home to only my neatly arranged skincare products, now overflowed with Amber's makeup, Ryan's electric razor, and the children's bubble bath and rubber toys. The guest towels I'd splurged on during a post-promotion shopping spree were perpetually damp and crumpled on the floor, but the physical chaos paled in comparison to the complete destruction of my peace and privacy. My morning routine, once a sacred time of quiet preparation and meditation, became a frantic obstacle course of avoiding everyone's path. My evening unwinding ritual disappeared entirely, replaced by Disney movies at full volume and endless questions from my niece about when I would be done with my laptop so she could watch YouTube. Work suffered most dramatically. Client calls were interrupted by background screaming matches over toys. Deadlines loomed larger as my productivity plummeted. During one crucial presentation to our biggest potential client, Jack burst into my office wailing about his sister stealing his action figure. The resulting chaos cost us the account, and my boss was not understanding. Heather, I know you're in a difficult family situation, but we can't afford these mistakes. Either get your home office under control or come into the building every day. The financial strain became impossible to ignore by week 3. My grocery bill tripled. The electricity usage spiked from all the additional devices, lights left on, and the air conditioning running constantly because the kids get hot when they play. Ryan's showers depleted my hot water tank daily. My carefully budgeted life spiraled into an unsustainable mess. Most concerning was the complete absence of job hunting from either Amber or Ryan. When I asked about their progress over dinner one night, Ryan shrugged. The job market's tough right now. No point rushing into something that's not the right fit. He said this while playing a video game on my television, having not left the apartment all day except to pick up fast food, which I later discovered had been charged to my credit card. You have to take something. I insisted, calculating how rapidly my savings were dwindling. Even if it's not ideal, some income is better than none. Amber rolled her eyes. You don't understand what it's like out there, Heather. You've been in the same company for years. The interview process nowadays is brutal, and they want ridiculous qualifications for entry-level positions. Have you actually applied anywhere? I pressed. The uncomfortable silence answered my question. Later that week, I came home early with a migraine to find my credit card statement open on my laptop, which I'd left password protected. The balance was nearly double what it should have been. Scrolling through the transactions, I found charges for clothing stores, online gaming subscriptions, and even a reservation at a weekend resort 3 hours away. When confronted, Amber's eyes immediately welled with tears. I'm so sorry. I was going to tell you. We just needed a few things for the kids, and then there was this amazing deal on a family getaway. We've all been so stressed, I thought it would be good for everyone. She sniffled dramatically. I was going to make it a surprise thank you for letting us stay here. With my money, without asking, I said flatly. I'll pay you back the second I get a job. I promise. Her hand clutched mine. Please understand. The kids need new school clothes, and after everything they've been through with the move, I just wanted them to have something to look forward to. Her performance was so convincing, her remorse so apparently genuine, that I almost believed her. Almost. Still battling my migraine, I didn't have the energy for a prolonged confrontation. Cancel the resort reservation, return whatever hasn't been worn, and never use my credit card without explicit permission again. Amber nodded eagerly, tears drying up suspiciously fast. Of course. I feel terrible about this. Let me make it up to you. I'll cook dinner tonight, your favorite pasta dish. Her offer was so inadequate compared to the violation that I nearly laughed. But the pasta dinner did happen, and for one evening, with Amber attentive and the children on surprisingly good behavior, I allowed myself to hope that perhaps we had reached a turning point. Maybe the explicit boundary about my finances had finally gotten through. I was helping dry dishes when I overheard Amber and Ryan talking in low voices in the living room, thinking I couldn't hear. Did she buy it? Ryan asked. Amber's laugh was soft but unmistakable. Hook, line, and sinker. Started with the tears and she folded like always. Had to cancel the resort, but we can book it again later. She never checks the return policies on the clothes. Classic Heather, Ryan chuckled. Always wants to believe the best. That's why she's so easy. Their casual discussion of manipulating me froze my blood. The dishcloth dropped from my hands as the magnitude of this betrayal sank in. It wasn't just financial exploitation, they were actively strategizing ways to take advantage of me while mocking my trust behind my back. That night, alone in my bedroom with the door locked, I opened my laptop and navigated to the Seattle real estate listings I'd been neglecting. The charming 2-bedroom condo I'd had my eye on was still available. The thought of that peaceful space, 3,000 miles from Chicago, and this suffocating situation suddenly felt less like a distant dream and more like a vital necessity. For the first time, I allowed myself to seriously consider what had previously seemed like an extreme reaction. I needed to leave. Not just ask them to move out, that clearly wouldn't work given their entitlement, but remove myself entirely from their reach. The realization brought with it both terror and a strange sense of clarity. I bookmarked the listing and made a note to call the Seattle agent first thing in the morning. The morning after overhearing Amber and Ryan's conversation, I woke with newfound resolve. While the apartment was still quiet, a rare blessing, I slipped into the bathroom and made a call to Meredith Park, the Seattle real estate agent I'd been in contact with before Amber's invasion. "Heather, lovely to hear from you. I was beginning to think you'd lost interest in the Belltown condo." "Quite the opposite," I whispered, constantly listening for footsteps in the hallway. "I'm actually hoping to accelerate the process. How quickly could we close if I made an offer today?" The conversation that followed was hushed but productive. With my excellent credit, substantial down payment ready, and the seller motivated to move, we could potentially close in 30 days. I scheduled a virtual tour for later that afternoon during my lunch break, which I'd take at a nearby cafe rather than at home. My office became my war room. Between client meetings, I methodically began organizing my escape. I created a new email account strictly for Seattle-related communications. I started researching moving companies with experience handling cross-country relocations. I compiled lists of documents I would need to gather, many of which were unfortunately in my apartment, now accessible only when I could ensure privacy. Jasmine Coleman, my colleague from the creative department and closest friend at work, became my confidant and ally in this operation. "They said what?" she exclaimed when I shared the overheard conversation during our coffee break. "Oh, hell no. You're not overreacting, Heather. This is financial abuse, plain and simple." Her validation was like oxygen. For weeks, I'd been gaslighted into believing my discomfort was selfishness, my boundaries were cruelty. Hearing someone else confirm the toxicity of the situation strengthened my resolve. "I'll help however I can," Jasmine offered. "You can have packages delivered to my place. Use my address for anything you don't want them to see. And if you need a place to crash before the move, my spare room is yours." That afternoon, I met with my financial advisor, Spencer, explaining the situation in careful terms. "I need to protect my assets," I told him. "I have reason to believe my accounts may be compromised." His expression grew serious. "Let's start by changing all your passwords and setting up two-factor authentication. Then, well, look at potentially opening new accounts at a different bank for your moving funds." Over the next week, I executed my plan with military precision. Passwords changed on every account, important documents secured in a small safe deposit box at my bank, credit cards canceled and reissued with new numbers. Mail forwarding set up to Jasmine's address starting in 3 weeks. Moving quotes obtained through emails sent only during work hours. The virtual tour of the Seattle condo exceeded my expectations. Sun-drenched rooms overlooking the city, with glimpses of Puget Sound from the main bedroom. A secure building with controlled access, the thought of which brought more relief than it should have. I made an offer that day, slightly above asking price to ensure acceptance. My secret felt both terrifying and exhilarating. For the first time in weeks, I had regained some control. At home, I maintained the facade of resignation to the current arrangement, even as I mentally catalogued which possessions would make the journey west and which would be left behind. The close call came 10 days into my planning. I'd stepped away from my laptop for a bathroom break, forgetting to close the tab with Seattle Moving Company quotes. When I returned, Amber was standing by my desk, eyes fixed on the screen. "Planning a trip?" she asked, her tone deceptively light. I closed the laptop with forced casualness. "Just research for a potential work project. We might be opening a satellite office." Her eyes narrowed slightly, but she nodded. "Sounds interesting. You know, Ryan's got a cousin in Seattle. Said the housing market there is insane. Is that right?" I murmured non-committally, heart pounding. That night I checked my browser history and found searches I hadn't made. Chicago to Seattle distance, cost of living Seattle, Washington state residency requirements. The invasion of privacy was blatant, but I couldn't confront her without revealing my plans. Instead, I became more careful. I worked exclusively on my office computer or on my laptop at coffee shops. I created decoy searches about Chicago apartment renovations and local job opportunities to throw her off the scent. 2 weeks after making my offer, I received the thrilling news that it had been accepted. Signing the initial paperwork required creative maneuvering a doctor's appointment that was actually a meeting with a notary public. Each step forward filled me with equal parts hope and anxiety. The third betrayal blindsided me completely. I was working late one evening when my personal email pinged with a notification. Opening it revealed a message I had apparently sent to my entire family, including aunts, uncles, and cousins. Dear family, I wanted to share some difficult news. I've been struggling with severe anxiety and possibly depression for some time now. My therapist has suggested I make some drastic changes, which is why I've been researching relocating to Seattle. Am not thinking clearly and could use your support during this confusing time. Please reach out to Amber, who has kindly taken on the role of helping me navigate this challenging period. With love, Heather. The blood drained from my face. I had sent no such email. My password had been changed that morning. Amber must have accessed my account before the update took effect. She was laying groundwork, establishing a narrative of mental instability to discredit any decisions I might make. Within minutes, my phone exploded with concerned messages. Heather, we had no idea you were suffering. Seattle is so far from family support. Is that wise right now? Thank goodness for Amber being there with you. Have you considered medication instead of such a drastic move? The coordinated attack continued the next day, with my parents calling from their retirement community, voices heavy with worry. Honey, we're so concerned. My mother began. Amber says you've been having some episodes, talking to yourself, making impulsive decisions. That's completely untrue, I said, struggling to keep my voice steady. Mom, I'm fine. Amber is manipulating you. My father's voice replaced hers. Now, Heather, there's no need to be defensive. Your sister is sacrificing a lot to help you through this rough patch. The least you could do is appreciate her concern. The conversation deteriorated from there, with every denial I made, seemingly confirming their belief in my instability. By the time I hung up, I was shaking with rage and helplessness. When I returned home that evening, Amber was waiting with a concerned expression so perfectly crafted it deserved an Academy Award. The family's really worried about you, she said softly. I am too. These plans to suddenly move across the country. It's not like you to be so impulsive. You accessed my email, I said flatly. You impersonated me. She had the audacity to look wounded. I'm trying to help you. You've been working so hard, under so much stress. It's affected your judgment. Seattle? Really? Away from everyone who loves you. I want you out of my apartment, I stated, voice low and dangerous. All of you. 1 week. Her eyes widened, then narrowed. I don't think that's a good idea in your current state. Besides, we have tenant rights now. We've been here over 30 days. The casual mention of legal protection she had apparently researched sent ice through my veins. Amber wasn't just manipulating me emotionally, she was preparing for a legal battle. We're family, she continued, the familiar refrain now sounding like a threat rather than a plea. Family sticks together through hard times, and right now you're the one having a hard time, Heather. Everyone can see it but you. As she spoke, my phone lit up with another message, this one from my boss requesting an urgent meeting tomorrow morning. The subject line sent a chill down my spine. Concerning your employment status. I retreated to my bedroom, locked the door, and called Jasmine in a panic. They're trying to make me look crazy, I whispered, afraid of being overheard, and I think Amber may have contacted my work. This is getting dangerous, Jasmine replied, alarm evident in her voice. You need to accelerate your exit plan. Can you stay with me starting tomorrow? As I packed an overnight bag with trembling hands, I realized this had escalated beyond a family disagreement. This was psychological warfare, and I was fighting for my sanity and future. The next morning, I sat across from Linda Mercer, my boss of 4 years, and Howard from HR, their expressions grave enough to confirm my worst suspicions. "Heather, we received a concerning call yesterday," Linda began carefully. "Your sister contacted us about her worries regarding your mental health." My stomach clenched. "And what exactly did my sister say?" Howard consulted his notes. "She mentioned erratic behavior, possible substance abuse issues, and plans to abandon your position without notice to move across the country." The calculated nature of Amber's attack left me breathless. She wasn't just trying to stop my move, she was attempting to destroy my career, my reputation, my entire life in Chicago. "None of that is true," I said, struggling to keep my voice steady. "I'm dealing with a complicated family situation. My sister and her husband quit their jobs, moved into my apartment uninvited, and are now financially dependent on me. I have been considering a transfer to our Seattle office eventually, but would never leave without proper notice." Linda's expression softened slightly. "That context helps explain some things. We've noticed changes in your performance recently, but attributed it to the new accounts you've taken on." "My home environment has made work challenging," I admitted, but am addressing the situation. After providing more details, carefully omitting my immediate escape plans, I left the meeting with my job intact but my anger at a breaking point. Amber had crossed a line that could not be uncrossed. I didn't return to my apartment that night, staying instead with Jasmine. The next morning, I stopped at a print shop to prepare formal letters before heading home. When I arrived, Amber was alone, the children at school, and Ryan mysteriously absent. "Where have you been?" she demanded. "We were worried sick." I placed the documents on the coffee table between us. "This is a formal notice giving you 30 days to vacate my property. I've included information on rental assistance programs and affordable housing options. I've also provided the names of employment agencies specializing in rapid placement." Amber stared at the papers, then at me, her expression morphing from shock to disbelief to rage. "You can't be serious," she whispered. "Deadly serious," I replied. "You have taken advantage of my generosity, invaded my privacy, attempted to sabotage my career, and manipulated our family against me. You have 30 days to find jobs and your own place. After that, I will pursue legal eviction." The explosion I expected came swiftly. Amber's face contorted as she leapt to her feet. "After everything I've done for you? I put my life on hold to help you through your breakdown. The whole family knows you're not well. Who do you think they'll believe?" "I'm documenting everything, Amber. Every unauthorized charge, every email you've sent impersonating me, every call to my workplace. If you contest the eviction, all of that becomes public record." Her eyes widened momentarily before narrowing again. "Ryan will never stand for this. You have no idea who you're dealing with." As if on cue, the front door slammed open and Ryan stormed in, his face flushed with anger. Someone had texted him. "What the hell is this?" he shouted, waving his phone where I assumed Amber had sent photos of the eviction notice. "You think you can just throw us out on the street? You have 30 days to find jobs and housing," I repeated calmly. "That's more than generous given the circumstances." Ryan stepped closer, his size suddenly intimidating in my small living room. "We're family. You don't do this to family. Family doesn't steal from each other. Family doesn't lie and manipulate. Family respects boundaries," I countered, standing my ground despite the fear bubbling in my chest. "You'll regret this," he promised, voice low. "Your precious reputation in the family won't survive what's coming." He wasn't wrong. Within hours, my phone exploded with messages and calls. Aunt Patricia, the family matriarch whose opinion carried significant weight, was the first to reach out. "Heather Mitchell, I raised your mother better than to have produced such a selfish child," she began without preamble. "Evicting your own sister with young children? I never thought I'd see such cruelty in this family." Each conversation followed a similar pattern, their information one-sided, their minds already made up, their disappointment in me palpable. The narrative Amber had crafted was masterful. Heather, the successful but unstable workaholic, having some sort of breakdown, the loving sister stepping in to help, only to be viciously cast out in a moment of paranoia. My parents' call was the most painful. My mother cried. My father's voice carried that heavy disappointment I'd spent my whole life trying to avoid. "We didn't raise you to turn your back on family," he said. "Whatever issues you're having with your sister, eviction is not the answer. Dad, they quit their jobs voluntarily. They're taking advantage of me. They've stolen from me. They contacted my work and tried to get me fired. That's not how Amber explains it," my mother interjected. "She says you've been acting erratically for months. Talking about running away to Seattle, making accusations, staying out all night. She's worried about you, and frankly, so are we." The conversation ended with my father's heavy sigh. "Fix this, Heather. Make it right with your sister. That's what matters most." The pressure was relentless. Relatives I hadn't spoken to in years suddenly had opinions about my personal life. Friends who knew only Amber's side questioned my stability. The isolation was suffocating. Through it all, I held firm to the eviction timeline, even as life in the apartment became increasingly hostile. Ryan made threatening comments under his breath when we passed in the hallway. Amber alternated between tearful pleas and cold silence. The children, sensing the tension, became more disruptive than ever. By the end of that week, I was spending most nights at Jasmine's apartment, returning home only to gather more belongings and check that my remaining possessions hadn't been damaged. The fourth betrayal came the following Tuesday. I received an urgent call from HR again, this time regarding a formal complaint they'd received, claiming I was planning to quit without notice and sabotage several major accounts before leaving. "The email came from your personal address," Howard explained, "but given our previous conversation, we thought it prudent to verify with you directly." I was simultaneously furious and grateful for their caution. I did not send that email. As I explained before, my sister has accessed my personal accounts. After that meeting, I returned to my apartment to find it in shocking disarray. Cushions slashed, photographs smashed, clothing strewn across the floor. A tantrum of epic proportions had clearly taken place. I stood in the wreckage of my home, physically exhausted and emotionally drained. For a moment, the thought of surrendering crossed my mind. Would it be easier to just give in? To cancel my Seattle plans and find some compromise that would restore peace with my family? Jasmine's voice on the phone that evening was like a lifeline. "Don't you dare give up now," she said fiercely. "This reaction proves you're doing the right thing. They're escalating because they're losing control over you. But my family will eventually see the truth. Right now they're being manipulated by someone who's had a lifetime to perfect her techniques. Stay strong. I'm with you." Her words were the reinforcement I needed to continue standing my ground, even as the ground beneath me felt increasingly unstable. After the apartment destruction incident, I realized I had been playing defense for too long. If I was going to escape this nightmare with my sanity, career, and future intact, I needed to switch to offense. The first step was understanding exactly what I was dealing with from a legal perspective. David Morales, a law school friend who specialized in tenant law, agreed to meet me for coffee the next morning. His expression grew increasingly grave as I detailed the situation. "They're exploiting squatters' rights tactics," he explained. "By refusing to leave and claiming they've established residency, they're setting up a legal battle that could drag on for months. What can I do?" I asked desperately. "Document everything," he advised. "Take photos of the apartment damage. Save all communications. Record conversations if you're in a one-party consent state like Illinois. And most importantly, follow formal eviction procedures to the letter. One misstep and they could extend this significantly." David became my second ally, reviewing my eviction notice and helping me prepare for the potential legal battle ahead. His expertise was invaluable, but his friendship, his unquestioning belief in my version of events was the true gift. Armed with legal knowledge, I began my counter-offensive with systematic documentation. I photographed the apartment destruction before cleaning anything. I started recording all interactions with Amber and Ryan when legal. I printed copies of the unauthorized credit card transactions and email breaches. but I needed more, something that would expose the pattern of behavior that my family refused to see. The breakthrough came from an unexpected source. Aunt Patricia, despite her initial condemnation, was the only family member who called to hear my side directly. Her voice was still crisp with disappointment, but at least she asked, "What exactly is your version of events, Heather?" I told her everything: the unannounced arrival, the financial exploitation, the sabotage attempts, the apartment destruction. When I finished, there was a long silence. "This sounds disturbingly familiar," she finally said. "What do you mean? Did you know Amber and Ryan lived with your cousin Thomas for 6 months 3 years ago? Or with your Uncle Bill and Aunt Marge for nearly a year before that?" I hadn't known. Those relatives lived in different states, and family gossip rarely reached me given my work schedule. What happened? Thomas never gave details, just said it ended badly. There was something about unauthorized credit card charges. And Marge mentioned once that they left owing 3 months' rent. Her voice had lost some of its edge. "I need to make some calls." That conversation sparked my investigation. I reached out to those relatives directly, explaining my situation and asking about their experiences. The pattern was shocking and identical. Amber and Ryan would arrive in crisis, overstay their welcome, while making no effort to improve their situation, exploit financial resources, and leave amid conflict and property damage. I compiled these accounts, along with my own evidence, into a comprehensive document. It wasn't just about winning my immediate battle anymore, it was about exposing the truth to protect others in the future. Meanwhile, Amber escalated her campaign against me. Family members reported she'd shared photos of prescription bottles from my bathroom cabinet, taken without permission, to prove I was medicated and unstable. She circulated an email claiming I'd thrown her children's belongings onto the street, completely fabricated. Ryan told mutual friends I had violent episodes that frightened the children, utterly false. Each new attack strengthened my resolve. I no longer cared about maintaining peace, I wanted justice and freedom. The fifth betrayal cut deepest of all. While gathering important documents for my impending move, I discovered my grandmother's jewelry box was missing from its place in my closet. The antique silver container held pieces passed down through generations, most notably my grandmother's wedding band and a pearl necklace she'd worn at my college graduation. When confronted, Amber didn't deny taking them. "I'm keeping them safe," she said with infuriating calmness. "Given your erratic behavior lately, the family agreed these heirlooms shouldn't be at risk." "What family? Who exactly agreed to this theft?" "Mom, Dad, Aunt Patricia. Everyone's concerned about your judgment right now." Her smile was serene, confident in her position. "The jewelry will be returned when you're thinking more clearly." The violation was staggering. These weren't just valuable items, they were tangible connections to my past, to the grandmother who had always believed in me. Taking them was both a strategic power move and a personal attack designed to cause maximum pain. My investigation into Amber and Ryan's finances yielded another shocking discovery. Through careful questioning of the children and examination of mail ID collected before they could intercept it, I learned their financial situation wasn't nearly as dire as they'd claimed. Ryan hadn't been fired from his previous job, had quit after a disagreement about taking excessive paid time off. They had savings they hadn't touched. Their desperate situation was largely self-created, and their previous residence had been abandoned despite having 2 months left on the lease. Most disturbing of all, I uncovered evidence of Ryan's gambling habit through credit card statements mailed to my address. The financial hardship they claimed was largely due to thousands of dollars lost on online poker sites and sports betting apps. Armed with this knowledge, I called a family meeting at my apartment, inviting my parents, via video call, Aunt Patricia, and 2 cousins who had experienced similar situations with Amber and Ryan. I prepared a presentation of evidence, complete with documentation, testimonials, and financial records. Amber and Ryan declined to attend, sending a message claiming they wouldn't participate in my delusional episode. Their absence only strengthened my position. "I've called you here because I need you to see the truth," I began. my voice stronger than it expected. For weeks, you've heard one version of events. Today, I'm presenting the facts. Methodically, I walked through everything: the financial exploitation, the career sabotage attempts, the property destruction, the pattern of similar behavior with other family members. I showed photos, played recordings, displayed financial records. Aunt Patricia, who had been quietly observing, finally spoke. "I owe you an apology, Heather. I should have asked more questions before jumping to conclusions." My parents' faces on the video call showed the slow, painful transition from denial to understanding. My mother wiped tears. My father's expression hardened, not against me, but in recognition of how thoroughly they'd been manipulated. Why wouldn't she just ask for help honestly? My mother wondered. Because this isn't about need, I explained. It's about control and entitlement. About taking rather than earning. The family meeting marked a turning point. The unified front against me began to fracture as the truth emerged. Not everyone was immediately convinced. Years of Amber's manipulation had left deep impressions, but enough doubt had been introduced to weaken her hold. When Amber realized her support system was crumbling, she made her most desperate move yet. She threatened to cut off all contact between me and my niece and nephew if I proceeded with the eviction. "You'll never see them again," she promised, voice cold. "I'll make sure they forget you even exist." Using children as emotional hostages was a new low, one that revealed the true nature of what I was fighting. This wasn't just about money or living arrangements, it was about breaking free from a lifetime of manipulation and enabling. The confrontation that followed was years in the making. With David's legal counsel and Jasmine's moral support waiting outside, I faced my sister and brother-in-law in what had once been my peaceful living room. "The eviction stands," I said firmly. "You have 15 days remaining to find alternative arrangements. The family now knows the truth, and I have legal documentation of everything. If you contest this, it becomes a legal matter with public records." Ryan stepped forward. Intimidation, his familiar tactic. "You think you've won? You have no idea what we're capable of." "Actually, I do, and so does everyone else now." I held his gaze without flinching. "The game is over." For the first time, I saw uncertainty flicker across Amber's face, the realization that her usual tactics had failed, that she had pushed too far and lost control of the narrative. In that moment of clarity, I knew I had finally turned the tide. The fallout from the family meeting was immediate and chaotic. Amber and Ryan, realizing they were losing control of the situation, intensified their efforts to maintain their position in my apartment. The psychological warfare evolved into something more concerning. Small items began disappearing from my bedroom, nothing valuable enough to report to police, but personal enough to be disturbing. My schedule was sabotaged in subtle ways. Alarm clocks unplugged, important documents accidentally spilled on, meetings mysteriously deleted from my calendar. The children were coached to require my attention during critical work calls. The constant low-grade harassment was designed to wear me down, to make surrender seem easier than continued resistance. In many ways it was working. My stress levels reached unprecedented heights. Sleep became elusive, appetite vanished. I started experiencing anxiety symptoms I'd never had before: racing heart, difficulty breathing, persistent dread. One evening, after a particularly draining day at work, I returned to find Ryan and Amber standing by my car in the parking lot. Ryan held out his hand. "We need to borrow your car," he stated, not asked. "Amber has a job interview tomorrow morning." Hope flared briefly. A job interview was the first positive step I'd heard about, until I remembered Amber had lost her driver's license months ago due to unpaid tickets. "I can't tomorrow. I have an early client meeting across town," I explained. "But I could help arrange an Uber." Ryan's face darkened. "That's not going to work. We need reliable transportation, not some stranger's car." "Hand over the keys." "I'm sorry, but I need my car for work. That's non-negotiable." What happened next unfolded with frightening speed. Ryan stepped closer, his body language aggressive. "I wasn't asking, Heather." I stepped back, clutching my purse tighter. and I wasn't offering. Back off, Ryan. He lunged forward, grabbing for my bag where my keys were visible. I pulled away instinctively, but his grip tightened around the strap. We struggled briefly before Amber joined in, reaching for my arm. "Just give us the keys," she shrieked. "Why do you have to make everything so difficult?" In the scuffle, I lost my balance, falling hard against my car. Pain shot through my shoulder. My purse fell, contents scattering across the pavement. Ryan immediately dove for the keys while Amber continued to berate me. "This is all your fault. We wouldn't need your car if you hadn't forced us into this situation." I scrambled to retrieve my keys first, managing to snatch them just before Ryan's hand closed over mine. His fingers dug into my wrist painfully as he tried to pry them from my grasp. "Let go!" I shouted, loud enough that lights came on in nearby apartments. The public attention caused Ryan to release me abruptly, though his expression promised this wasn't over. "You'll regret this," he threatened quietly before walking away. Amber following after, shooting me a venomous glare. Shaking and bruised, I retreated to my car, locked the doors, and called Jasmine. My composure finally shattered completely. "I can't do this anymore," I sobbed into the phone. "They're never going to leave willingly." "Maybe I should just give up on Seattle and find another apartment here in Chicago." "Don't you dare," Jasmine responded fiercely. "That's exactly what they want to break you down until you give up your dreams. Come to my place tonight. Well, figure this out." That night, curled on Jasmine's couch with an ice pack on my shoulder, I reached my emotional rock bottom. The Seattle dream that had sustained me through this nightmare suddenly seemed impossible. The legal eviction process could take months. My family relationships were in tatters. My physical and mental health were deteriorating rapidly. "I don't know if I can keep fighting," I admitted in the darkness of Jasmine's living room. "It's costing me too much." The next morning, as I contemplated calling my Seattle real estate agent to withdraw my offer, my phone rang with an unexpected name on the caller ID: Aunt Patricia. "I saw them," she said without preamble. "I drove by your building last night to drop off some information David thought might help, and I witnessed that disgraceful scene in the parking lot." "Are you all right?" "Physically, yes," I answered honestly. "Emotionally, I'm at the end of my rope. I should have seen this sooner," she said, her voice heavy with regret. "Amber's always been troubled, but I never imagined she'd resort to physical intimidation. This has to stop." What followed was a revelation that shifted the entire dynamic. Aunt Patricia, it turned out, had been doing her own investigation since our family meeting. She'd spoken with every relative Amber and Ryan had stayed with, documenting a clear pattern of exploitation that spanned nearly a decade. "Did you know they did the same thing to your cousin Michael in Boston? And your Uncle James in Philadelphia? It's identical each time a crisis, moving in temporarily, financial drainage, then conflict and property damage before they move to the next target." The confirmation that this was a calculated, repeating scheme rather than a one-time desperate situation crystallized everything. I wasn't dealing with family members in need, I was dealing with predators who had selected me as their latest victim. "I've already spoken with your parents," Aunt Patricia continued. "They're finally seeing the full picture, and they're horrified. Your father is flying in tomorrow to help handle this situation." The cavalry was finally arriving. The isolation that had made me vulnerable was breaking. For the first time in weeks, hope flickered to life again. That afternoon, Aunt Patricia arranged an emergency family conference call. One by one, relatives shared their experiences with Amber and Ryan's stories that had previously been kept quiet out of embarrassment or misplaced family loyalty. The pattern was undeniable and damning. My father, whose disappointment had cut deepest, now spoke with renewed clarity. "This ends now. I failed you by not listening sooner, Heather. I won't fail you again." When I finally returned to my apartment that evening, bolstered by family support and accompanied by Aunt Patricia for safety, Amber was alone in the living room. Her expression when she saw her aunt was priceless, shock quickly masked by calculated warmth. "Aunt Patricia, what a lovely surprise," she began, only to be cut off by the older woman's raised hand. "Save it, Amber. I know everything. We all do now. This stops immediately. Amber's mask slipped, then shattered entirely. The transformation was both fascinating and terrifying to witness, her features hardening, eyes growing cold, voice dropping to a tone it only heard when she thought no one important was listening. You have no idea what she's really like, she hissed, gesturing at me. Perfect Heather with her perfect job and perfect apartment. She's always had everything handed to her while I struggled. This is about balance, about what I'm owed. You're owed nothing, Aunt Patricia stated firmly. What you've done to your sister, to multiple family members, is inexcusable. You and Ryan have 24 hours to pack your things and leave, or we proceed with formal eviction and potential criminal charges for the assault yesterday. You can't make us leave. Amber sneered. We know our rights. Perhaps, Aunt Patricia conceded. But are you prepared for what happens when this becomes public? When future potential hosts can Google your names and find court records, when your children's schools learn about their parents' behavior? Legal eviction isn't private, Amber. The threat of public exposure of permanent documentation that would make their scheme impossible to execute again finally penetrated Amber's defiance. I watched as calculation replaced anger in her eyes, as she reassessed her position and found it untenable. That night marked my true breaking point, not into surrender, but into liberation. The truth had finally emerged, incontrovertible and public within our family. The power dynamics had shifted decisively, and I rediscovered the strength that had been gradually eroded by months of gaslighting and manipulation. My Seattle dream wasn't just possible again. It was inevitable. The only question remaining was how much more drama would unfold before I could claim my freedom. The morning after Aunt Patricia's intervention, my father arrived from Florida, his familiar figure at the airport, bringing an unexpected wave of emotion. We had spoken extensively by phone, but seeing him in person, seeing the determination in his eyes to make things right, broke something open inside me. I'm so sorry, Heather, he said, embracing me tightly. I should have believed you from the start. You believed what you were conditioned to believe. I replied, understanding now how Amber's manipulation had been perfected over decades. What matters is that you're here now. We drove directly to my apartment where David, my lawyer friend, was waiting with formal legal notices. The documents outlined 3 options for Amber and Ryan. Leave voluntarily within 24 hours with a signed agreement never to return. Accept financial assistance to secure new housing within 5 days. Or face immediate legal eviction proceedings with accompanying criminal charges for the assault and theft. We've documented everything, David explained, his professional demeanor intimidating in its certainty. The unauthorized credit card charges constitute fraud. The physical altercation in the parking lot is assault. The jewelry taken without permission is theft, and we have witness statements confirming all of it. Ryan, who had returned to the apartment that morning, paced like a caged animal as the options were presented. Amber sat stone-faced on my couch, the children mercifully absent at a neighbor's apartment arranged by Aunt Patricia. This is bullshit. Ryan finally exploded. You can't just throw us out on the street. We have kids. No one's throwing children anywhere, my father replied calmly. Option 2 includes first and last month's rent for a new apartment, plus moving expenses. Your children will be secure if you make the responsible choice, and if we refuse. Amber challenged, though her voice lacked its usual confidence. David slid the 3rd set of papers forward. Then we file these today. By 5 p.m., the Cook County Sheriff's Office will have eviction papers to serve. The criminal complaints go to the district attorney simultaneously. Your choice. The standoff lasted through the afternoon, with Ryan and Amber retreating to my office, still serving as their bedroom for private consultation. By evening, faced with the unified front of family and legal pressure, they emerged with reluctant acceptance of option 2. Well, take the housing assistance, Amber announced, as though granting a generous concession. But I want it clear that we're doing this for the children, not because any of these ridiculous accusations have merit. The details were finalized with cold efficiency. financial assistance in exchange for a signed agreement to vacate within 5 days and release any claims to tenancy. David had thought of everything, including a non-disparagement clause to protect my professional reputation and specified consequences if any further attempts were made to contact my employer. While Ryan coordinated with a budget apartment complex that had immediate availability, I worked with the building management to ensure a smooth departure. Security would be present during the moving process. Locks would be changed immediately afterward. Nothing was left to chance. Coordinating with Jasmine, I accelerated my own moving plans. The Seattle condo closing was still weeks away, but I had no intention of remaining in an apartment with such painful associations. I would stay with Jasmine until my cross-country move, my most essential possessions already packed and secured in her spare room. The emotional barrier between myself and my niece and nephew was the most painful aspect of the entire ordeal. Though they had been used as pawns in their parents' scheme, they were innocent victims, confused by the sudden changes and tension. Before they left, I requested private time with them, which was grudgingly granted under my father's supervision. "Are you mad at us, Aunt Heather?" my niece asked tearfully as we sat in the building's community room. "No, sweetheart, never at you," I assured her, heart breaking at her worry. Grown-ups sometimes have complicated disagreements that have nothing to do with the children they love, but Mom says we won't see you anymore, my nephew added, his small face serious. "That's not true," I promised, choosing my words carefully. "I'm moving to a beautiful city called Seattle, but we can video chat whenever you want, and someday when you're older, maybe you can come visit me there." I gave them each a small gift box with personal inscriptions and my contact information hidden inside, instructions to call anytime they needed me. It wasn't perfect, but it established a connection independent of their parents' control. As the departure date approached, I maintained physical and emotional distance from Amber and Ryan, coordinating necessary interactions through my father or David. The less ammunition they had for future manipulation, the better. The actual moving day arrived with unexpected anticlimactic ease. Under the watchful eyes of building security and my father, Amber and Ryan loaded their belongings into a rented moving truck. The apartment, when finally emptied of their presence, revealed the full extent of their destructive tenancy-stained carpets, damaged furniture, walls in need of repainting. "Well, handle the repairs," my father promised, surveying the damage. "You focus on your fresh start." As they prepared to leave, Amber approached me one final time, her expression unreadable. "This isn't over," she said quietly, though without her usual venom. It sounded almost like a question. "Yes, it is," I replied with calm certainty. "For both our sakes, I hope you get help and find a healthier way forward." Something flickered across her face, perhaps the first genuine emotion I'd seen from her in months. Not remorse exactly, but a momentary recognition of the consequences her actions had created. "The children," she began, "will always have my number." I finished for her. "They can call any time. That's non-negotiable." She nodded once before turning away, the closest to agreement we would reach. After they departed, the apartment was secured, locks changed, security system updated. The physical separation was complete, though the emotional aftermath would take longer to process. That evening, sitting in Jasmine's living room with my father and Aunt Patricia, I felt the first real sense of peace in months. "Seattle," my father mused, examining the photos of my soon-to-be home. "It's beautiful. Far, but beautiful. The distance is part of the appeal," I admitted. "I need space to rebuild, you know." Aunt Patricia observed, "Sometimes the healthiest thing we can do for family is to establish firm boundaries. Blood doesn't entitle anyone to exploit you." The wisdom of her words resonated deeply. This ordeal had taught me that family obligation couldn't be a one-way street, that love without boundaries wasn't love at all but enablement. As the days passed and my departure for Seattle approached, family relationships began their slow healing process. My parents, now fully aware of the pattern of behavior they had unwittingly encouraged, began their own journey of reflection. Regular calls replaced the strained silence of previous months. Plans were made for them to visit Seattle once I was settled. The final pieces of my escape plan fell neatly into place. Closing on the condo proceeded without complications. My company approved a transfer to the Seattle office, impressed by my professionalism throughout the personal crisis. Movers were scheduled, arrangements finalized. On my last night in Chicago, Jasmine organized a small farewell gathering of close friends and supportive family members. The conspicuous absence of Amber and Ryan was a relief rather than a shadow. To new beginnings, Jasmine toasted, raising her glass, and to finding the strength to choose yourself when necessary. The sentiment captured exactly what this journey had been, not just an escape from toxic dependency, but an affirmation of my right to pursue my own happiness without guilt or obligation to those who would exploit it. Tomorrow I would board a plane to Seattle, leaving behind the remains of a battle I had never sought but ultimately won. The victory wasn't in hurting Amber or excising her from my life completely. It was in establishing the boundaries that made a healthier relationship possible, whether that potential was ever realized or not. The path forward was finally clear, unobstructed by manipulation or guilt. For the first time in months, I could breathe freely, my future once again my own to shape. 6 months into my Seattle life, standing on my condo balcony with coffee in hand, watching the morning sunlight shimmer across Puget Sound, I realized I hadn't checked over my shoulder once that week. The hypervigilance that had become second nature during the final months in Chicago had finally begun to fade, replaced by a calm certainty that this space was truly mine, secure, peaceful, and free from intrusion. My transition to the Seattle office had exceeded expectations. Without the constant drain of my home situation, my creative energy and focus returned full force. The team welcomed my Chicago experience, and my boss noted the positive shift in my performance during our first quarterly review. "Whatever was holding you back before has clearly been resolved," she observed. "You're the asset we hoped for when approving the transfer." My apartment had become a true sanctuary. Clean lines, abundant natural light, and not a single item that didn't bring me joy or serve a purpose. It'd been ruthless in my fresh start, donating or discarding anything that carried negative associations from the past. The result was a space that reflected not just my aesthetic but my reclaimed peace of mind. The unexpected doorbell one Saturday morning sent a momentary spike of anxiety through me. Old habits died hard, until I checked the security camera to find my parents on the doorstep, their visit planned but their arrival time earlier than expected. "We couldn't wait to see you," my mother explained as they entered, her eyes taking in the apartment with appreciation. "Your father insisted on catching the first flight out." Their visit marked an important milestone in our healing process. Over the previous months, our conversations had evolved from careful navigation of the Amber situation to deeper discussions about family dynamics, enabling behaviors, and the patterns that had allowed the crisis to develop. "We've been doing a lot of thinking," my father said that evening as we shared dinner overlooking the city lights, "about how we parented both of you girls. The different expectations, the ways we might have contributed to everything that happened." My mother reached for my hand across the table. "We enabled behaviors in Amber that we shouldn't have, and we placed burdens on you that weren't fair. I want you to know we see that now." The acknowledgement meant more than they could know, not because I needed to assign blame, but because recognition of these patterns was the first step toward breaking them. "Have you heard from her?" I asked, the question inevitable, despite my determination to focus on the present. My parents exchanged glances. "They're in counseling," my father offered. "Both of them. Separately, and as a couple. Amber's working with a financial advisor too. It's early, but there seems to be some progress." "Ryan admitted to the gambling problem," my mother added. "Apparently it's been going on for years. They're in a structured repayment plan with creditors now." The news brought mixed emotions, cautious hope, tempered by years of experience with Amber's, temporary improvements, and inevitable backslides. But the involvement of professional help was new, and potentially significant. The children ask about you, my mother continued gently. They miss their Aunt Heather. Despite everything, those words tugged at my heart. I had maintained contact through carefully scheduled video calls, always when Amber and Ryan were at therapy sessions and my parents could supervise. Those precious connections, though limited, had been essential to my healing process. I miss them too, I admitted. But the boundaries need to stay firm for now. My father nodded in understanding. Absolutely. Amber needs to demonstrate substantial, consistent change before any reconsideration of the current arrangement. We've made that clear to her. And how has she responded to that clarity? I asked, unable to keep the skepticism from my voice. With resistance at first, he acknowledged. But her therapist seems to be making headway on the concept of natural consequences. Your Aunt Patricia has been instrumental too, offering support while maintaining firm boundaries. Aunt Patricia had indeed become an unexpected ally and mentor through this process. Our weekly phone calls often focused on the delicate balance of family love and necessary self-preservation. Family is precious, she would remind me, but not at the cost of your well-being. True family builds you up rather than depletes you. As my parents' visit continued through the weekend, I showed them my favorite Seattle discoveries, the waterfront park where I took morning runs, the neighborhood cafe where the barista already knew my usual order, the bookstore, with the perfect reading nook, where I'd rediscovered my love of fiction after months of being too stressed to focus on reading. You seem at peace here, my mother observed as we walked along the shoreline. I worried the distance would be difficult, but this place suits you. The distance was necessary, I replied honestly. I needed space to rebuild without constantly bracing for the next crisis. We understand that now, my father assured me, though we hope someday the distance won't feel so necessary. Their support, free from judgment or pressure to reconcile before I was ready, was healing in itself. By the time they departed for their flight back to Florida, something had shifted between us, a new understanding based on honesty rather than obligation. In the months that followed, small signs of Amber's progress began to appear. A handwritten letter of apology arrived, lacking the dramatic flair and emotional manipulation of her previous communications. She acknowledged specific actions, the unauthorized credit card usage, the invasion of privacy, the sabotage attempts at work without excuses or deflection. I'm working to understand why I believed I was entitled to take advantage of your generosity, she wrote. It wasn't about need, as you correctly pointed out. It was about control and resentment that I'm only now beginning to address. I read the letter several times, searching for the familiar patterns of manipulation, but finding instead an unfamiliar accountability. It wasn't enough to erase the past, but it was the first step toward a possible future relationship with healthier boundaries. My response was measured, acknowledging her efforts without promising immediate forgiveness or restored trust. Those would need to be earned over time through consistent actions rather than words. The most meaningful development came through my continued connection with my niece and nephew. Our video calls, initially supervised by my parents, gradually expanded to include brief conversations with Amber herself. The interactions were awkward at first, carefully circumscribed to discussions about the children's activities and interests. Jack made the soccer team, she shared during one such call, her tone tentative but genuine. He wanted you to know. That's wonderful, I replied, watching my nephew's proud smile. I'd love to see some game photos if that's okay. These small moments of ordinary family connection, unmarred by manipulation or hidden agendas, offered hope that something healthier might eventually be possible. Not the enmeshed, boundaryless relationship of the past, but something built on mutual respect and appropriate limits. 1 year after my escape from Chicago, I hosted a small housewarming gathering in my fully settled Seattle home. Jasmine flew in for the weekend. My parents attended. Friends from my new life and old mingled in the space I had created for myself. As the evening wound down, Jasmine and I stepped onto the balcony for a moment of quiet reflection. When I think about where you were a year ago, she mused, barely holding it together in my guest room, convinced you'd never break free. And now look at you. I smiled, taking in the twinkling city lights below us. I couldn't have done it without you, without everyone who helped me see the situation clearly when I was too close to it. No, she disagreed firmly. We supported you, but you did the hard work. You stood your ground when it would have been easier to surrender. You chose yourself when everyone was telling you that was selfish. Her words resonated with the most important lesson of this journey, that establishing boundaries wasn't selfish but necessary, that taking care of myself wasn't an act of abandonment but of preservation. The path forward remained complex. Amber and I were slowly rebuilding a relationship with clear boundaries and limited expectations. Trust would take much longer to restore, if it ever fully could be. But the toxic cycle had been broken, the pattern disrupted. Most importantly, I had discovered a strength within myself that no future crisis could easily shake the certainty that I deserved peace, respect, and sovereignty over my own life. The knowledge that love didn't require martyrdom, that family obligation had limits, that saying no was sometimes the most necessary act of self-care. As my guests departed that evening, leaving me alone in the quiet sanctuary I had fought so hard to create, I felt a profound sense of closure. The Seattle dream that had sustained me through my darkest moments had become reality. The woman who had nearly surrendered to manipulation and guilt had been replaced by someone stronger, wiser, and unafraid to prioritize her own well-being. The journey hadn't been easy, and certain wounds would always carry scars. But in choosing to move far, far away, I had found my way back to myself, and that was worth every difficult step along the path to freedom. What about you? Have you ever had to establish difficult boundaries with family members? What was the hardest part, setting the boundaries or maintaining them? I'd love to hear your experiences in the comments below. If this story resonated with you, please like, subscribe, and share with someone who might need to hear that prioritizing your well-being isn't selfish, it's necessary. Thank you for joining me on this journey. And remember, sometimes the greatest act of love is knowing when to walk away. Take care of yourselves, and I'll see you in the next story.